About halfway through 2017, a friend and I decided to pack up a few things and head out to a nearby abandoned hospital that sat in the middle of town. The children's ward was definitely odd, but most of the hospital was decimated. I grabbed my camera, my laptop, and everything I needed to capture any evidence that might happen that night. I took everything and headed to my friend's house to pick him up. Once we were both ready, we headed to the park to monitor the hospital and police coming and going. A few hours later, we noticed a few people walking toward the hospital. We decided to duck for cover, but then realized they were kids from the town. We joined them and formed an insertion team of 3 and a surveillance team of 2. We opened the windows on the inside of the hospital's horseshoe. Darkness was our only defense. I went inside with the 2 who showed up, while Cody and the other 3 stayed outside. Once inside, I locked the windows so that no one could come in from the outside and rape us. We turned on our flashlights and pressed the record button on the camera. We walked out of the room with the window, and we made our way through the maze of construction equipment and doorways leading to other rooms. When we finally found the stairs, we went upstairs and placed all my belongings on a stretcher in the middle of the reception area. As I looked around, I remember a feeling of darkness and silence slowly overtaking the room. I had experienced this feeling before, and I don't know how to explain it, but I knew, perhaps instinctively, that something was about to happen. Maybe it was the darkness of the entire hospital, or maybe it was the numbing silence, or maybe it was both, to be honest. When the phone started ringing, I knew something was wrong. I picked up the phone to find that it was my friend outside calling. She said, "What's up? The lights are on now and I can see a window leading to the roof. I see an open doorway with a small window on the right, and I see a hallway that leads to the area of the child dolls I left for the spirit of the little girl. Hey, you guys get out of there right now, it's dangerous." I sigh as I hear my friend scream. I knew that if he was scared, he would want to run away, even if we had just gotten there. I looked around once more and decided that I didn't really believe him and just wanted to go home normally. "Brother, we just set up. Why do we need to leave?" He said, "One of us jumped into the window you guys went into, another onto the roof, and the third onto the upstairs window." In other words, an 8-foot shadow jumped into the hospital. I don't believe that. I tried to tell him how bullshit he was talking, but before I could say anything more, I heard the loudest noise I had ever heard right behind me. I turned around to see if the other 2 were taunting me, and they were on either side of me. I looked at them both, and we nodded in agreement. "Yeah, fuck it. We're on our way." I immediately hung up the phone and began to pack up everything I had just unpacked. I slung my bag over my shoulder and ran down the hallway back to the stairs. On my way down the stairs, I felt a dark presence crawl over me and I immediately began to fall. The sound of a baby crying, the sound of wood hitting wood, the sound of walls slamming into each other, and eventually the sound of bones shattering into pieces. The pain was tremendous, first my skull, then a migraine headache that felt like an ice pick sticking out of my head. Next, 3 ribs. The sharp edge of a coffee table slammed into my stomach, and 3 ribs on the right side of my body were completely destroyed, with shrapnel in my lungs and stomach. Then another rib was broken, then another, and another. Breathing was difficult at this time, and no matter how hard I tried, every breath felt as if my lungs were punctured by rib fragments. My collarbone was torn from the inside and I could barely move. Finally able to stand, I saw myself as a recovering infant in the hospital, my body covered with bandages and casts. I can't believe they would do this to a 4-month-old child. I heard a voice behind me. I turned around to see 2 people picking up the broken body of the infant and putting it back together. They reached into their own chests, took out half of their own hearts, put them together, this time their own complete hearts, and slipped them into the baby's chest. I knew that this baby was me. I knew that they were the 2 people who had adopted me, my new parents, the ones who had saved me. I felt happy now. More than anything, I wanted to hug them and thank them for taking away my pain. But before I could do that, I felt a flood of pain in my new heart. I looked over and saw my sister Stephanie. Her brain tumor had grown and was now shaped like a baseball. Finally, my sister disappeared and darkness overtook me again. I turned to look back at my parents, but there was my mother, crumpled on the ground, frustrated and devastated. My father lay in bed, his memory fading and his body was failing. My father, who had once saved me, was now a frail shell of his former self. I tried to scream, to tell him with all my might that I loved him, but my words were drowned out by the sound of 2 gunshots. I looked to my right and saw my brother lying in a pool of his own blood. In my brother's left hand was still holding the gun he had stolen from my mother and used to end it all. When I saw my father, reduced to skin and bones, being placed in his coffin, it was very hard for me to say goodbye. As he was being placed in the coffin, I felt my body jump down with him. The sensation of falling overtook me again. As I got closer to the light, this time I felt the urge to vomit as the light consumed me. I woke up on the ground, covered in sweat. I looked around and saw that I was outside and everyone was looking down at me. I looked back at the hospital and saw the windows wide open. It was hard to just remember what had happened, so I got up, closed the window, and locked it from the outside. I wiped my forehead and my arms were covered in sweat. I turned back to them and nodded. We headed home, unable to stop thinking about what had happened at the hospital. I knew I could never go back to the hospital in Halstead, Kansas again. The hospital stood quietly and majestically against the night sky, its darkened windows casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. Inside, faint footsteps echoed from the hallways. Dr. Emily Carter hurried down the dimly lit hallway. She had volunteered for the night shift and was eager to catch up on paperwork in the quiet of the late night. But as she walked through the deserted hospital, a certain uneasiness struck her. St. Mary's Hospital had long been rumored to be the scene of strange happenings and unexplained phenomena that plagued the night shift. But as she walked down the empty corridor, she couldn't help but feel as if she were being watched. When she reached the end of the hallway, Emily stopped, her heart pounding in her chest. A flickering light caught her attention and she turned her gaze to the open door of an abandoned hospital room. As she stepped fearfully in, her footsteps echoed on the tiled floor. It was a confused scene, as if there had been a struggle, but there was no patient in sight and no explanation for the commotion. Emily's hands trembled, and she reached for her cell phone. Emily's fingers rested on the phone's keypad, her thoughts lost in the strange scene she had stumbled upon. She wondered whether to call for help or investigate further. She took a deep breath, braced herself, and stepped deeper into the room, determined to uncover the truth. As she took in the scene before her, Emily's eyes were drawn to a figure cowering in the corner. Feeling fearful, she approached cautiously. "Are you all right?" Emily's voice trembled with anxiety. The figure moved slowly, slowly, slowly. The patient's eyes were empty and vacant, his gaze fixed on some unseen horror. Adrenaline surging, Emily turned and fled the room. Panic coursed through her veins as she reached for her cell phone. But as the phone finished ringing, Emily realized she was not alone in the hospital. Emily's heart raced as her footsteps echoed off the sterile walls. Panic stirred in her chest as her own footsteps echoed off the sterile walls. She had to get out of the hospital before it was too late. But no matter which direction she turned, darkness seemed to close in around her and swallow her whole. With each passing hour, the sense of dread grew stronger and threatened to overwhelm her completely. Just when she thought it was over, Emily came upon a stairwell with a metal door slightly ajar. Hopeful, she pushed through the door and began to climb, gasping for breath. At the top of the stairs, Emily found herself on a rooftop. The cool night air enveloped her as if soothing. With a sense of relief, she looked around the horizon, searching for help. But as she looked into the darkness, Emily realized she was not alone. A figure stood at the edge of the roof, its silhouette looming against the night sky. With horror, Emily realized that the horror of St. Mary's Hospital was not over yet, and that she was the next victim. The windows were broken and the walls were covered in graffiti. Jenna shivered as she approached the imposing building, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. She had heard stories of ghosts appearing and unexplained noises echoing through the halls. Curiosity outweighed fear. Footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. The air was heavy with the smell of decay, and Jenna could feel the weight of the building's history. She had heard rumors about the hospital's dark past, stories of unethical experiments and patients who had disappeared without a trace. As Jenna moved deeper into the hospital, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, and strange noises echoed in the empty halls. But she pushed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the hospital's sinister reputation. As Jenna explored the abandoned hospital, she could not help but feel that something was terribly wrong. The once bustling corridors were eerily quiet, with only the sound of her own footsteps echoing. Every time I passed by an empty hospital room, I felt a chill run down my spine. With each step, Jenna felt the grim atmosphere of the hospital looming over her. She felt a presence lurking in the shadows, watching her every move, but she could not shake the feeling that she was not alone. Suddenly, Jenna heard a faint whisper from down the hall. Her heart pounding in her chest, she followed the sound to a staircase that led to the darkness below. Jenna descended terrified into the basement of the abandoned hospital. With each step, the air grew colder, and Jenna felt the weight of the building pressing down on her. At the bottom of the stairs, Jenna found herself in a dimly lit hallway lined with rusted metal doors. She hesitated for a moment, instinct screaming at her to turn back, but curiosity got the better of her. With trembling hands, she opened the door and stepped inside. The room was small and musty, filled with rusty medical equipment and tattered curtains. It was a row of jars filled with human organs, the contents preserved in formaldehyde. With a sigh of horror, Jenna stumbled backward. She knew she had to get out of the hospital quickly before someone or something lurking deep within the hospital made her its next victim.